Hi everyone, welcome to Jawaras. Let's continue our discussion of Spring IOC container. So in this video, we are going to talk about class path scanning and managed beans. So far, we have been using XML to define the beans and define the dependencies among the beans. So in previous videos, we have removed the XML to define the dependencies among the bean, but we are still using XML to define the beans. In this video, we will try to remove the XML configuration to define the beans, and we will use annotations to do that. So now there are some annotations which are called stereotype annotations provided by the Spring. So the first annotation is component annotation. So we can put component annotation on any component or any class to mark it as a bean. So one instance of that class will be created and it will be put inside a Spring IOC container, and whenever someone needs it, that bean will be injected there. So this is like creating a bean itself. So we don't need to specify that in the XML. Spring IOC container will automatically create a bean. There are three more stereotype annotations. Actually there are more than three. There are many other stereotype annotations, but we'll talk about these uh, four in this video. The second annotation is repository annotation, which is used on data access objects, which has the responsibility of interacting with database. But instead of repository, we can use component annotation as well. But it's more readable. Like whenever we put repository annotation, then whoever reads the code will be able to understand that this has the responsibility of interacting with database. Then there is service annotation, which is used to create a bean of business logic object. Then there is control annotation, which is put on the classes which handles incoming web requests. Now how to create a bean? So in order to create a bean automatically, we can use component annotation as we have mentioned here, but it's more logical to use repository or service or control annotation for a specific type of classes. So in this example, we have book repository, and book repository is responsible for interacting with database. So it makes more sense to use repository annotation instead of component annotation. You can use component annotation as well, but it makes more sense to use repository annotation. And then we have a second class which is book service. Now it contains the logic, or it contains the business logic. So in this case, it makes more sense to use service annotation here instead of component annotation. So component would also work, but we are using service annotation here. And book service needs an instance of book repository, so we are using AutoAdd, and we have already seen AutoAdd in the previous videos. So this will inject the book repository automatically. So let's do that. I already created a project which is Spring Core E14 managed components. So let's remove few of the things. Let's remove everything. So we have resources and we have Java. Inside Java, let's create a new. So first of all, create open pom.xml file, and add as maven project. Okay. Now inside Java we can create a new Java class. Let's create it inside main package and call it main class, and create a main method here and print hello for now, whether it works or not. Okay, so hello is being printed. So this is the pom.xml. So we are using Java version 17, and I have already added Spring context dependency, which is used to interact with Spring IOC container. And let's create an beans.xml file XML configuration file spring config, let's call it beans. So here we use to define beans. So shortly we will get rid of this beans.xml file, but for now let's put it there. Let's create a new Java class inside repositories package and call it book repository. And let's create another Java class inside services and call it book service. And book service needs a book repository, and we have already seen that we can use auto add annotation to automatically inject this dependency, and we can use service annotation to create bean of book service, and to create bean of book repository we can use annotation. We can use component as well, but we will use service here because, sorry, not service, we will use repository here because book repository is responsible for interacting with database. Okay, now let's go to main, and here let's create application context. Application context will be new class path XML application context, and the name of the file is beans.xml. Now let's access book repository and book service. So book repository will be context.getBean of type book repository, and let's print book repository. Now let's access book service. Context.getBean of type book service, and let's print it out. Okay, so let's run it. If we run it, we will get exception that no qualifying bean of type repositories.book repository available. So how we used to do that? Let's say we create a bean of type repositories.book repository, and we create a bean of type services.book service, and it will work because now we are explicitly telling Spring ISO container to create beans of type book repository and book service, but we don't want to do that. So as I have already shown you how to do that, we can use add repository and add the red service. So we can use add repository for book repository, and we can use add the red service for book service. So but it is not working because we did not tell Spring that we want to scan the components. So for stereotype annotations to work, we need to explicitly tell Spring ISA container that you should look for any components which are, or any classes which are annotated with stereotype annotations, and create a bean of those classes. Spring will not do that automatically. We need to tell Spring to do that. So let's do that. So go to his beans, and here we need to use context component scan. So context component scan, and here we need to specify the packages where the classes are present with stereotype annotations. So let's say repositories, and if we run it again, you can see the book repository is being printed here, but we are getting exception in book service. No qualifying bean of type services.book service available. The reason is that the book service is inside services package, but we have not specified services package in base packages. So let's specify services as well, and if we run it now, we can see both book repository and book service is available. And let's create a toString method here to validate whether the book repository which the Spring IOC container has is same as the book repository which this book service has. If we run it, now we can see this is the repository in the IOC container, and the same book repository is inside book service as well. So that's how we use stereotype annotations. Now, now we have only one line here, uh, which is telling Spring to scan the components inside these packages. So, is there any way that we can completely remove this XML? And the answer is yes. So, what we can do is, instead of using class path XML application context, we can use something else. And which is, so instead of class path XML application context, we can use annotation config application context, and we can specify that which packages IOC container needs to scan in order to create the beans. So let's do that. So instead of class path XML application context, we can use annotation config application context, and here we can specify the all the packages. So let's say repositories and services. So another string. So you can specify as many packages as you want here, and if you run it again, it's working fine. Now you can see we are not using beans.xml. So is it safe to delete bean.xml? Let's try that. So delete beans.xml and rerun the application, and it's working fine. So now we have completely removed the beans.xml. So we are able to use only Java code and annotations to specify the beans and to inject the dependencies. Now there is one more annotation called configuration annotation. So you can read more about configuration annotation if you go to Spring Java doc and search for configuration. So let's search for configuration. So we can declare zero or more bean methods, and whatever those method returns, those beans will be available to Spring IOC container, and it can be processed by Spring IOC container to generate bean definitions. So how do we use that? So we use configuration annotation on any class, and we can declare any beans. So let's see that how do we do that. So let's create a new class inside config package, and I will say project config here, and denote it with configuration. And now we can create or we can pass this class to Spring IC container in order to create or in order to define the beans. So let's go to main.java. So here I will not pass anything to annotation config application context, and then what I will do is context dot register, but the register method is only available to annotation config application context. So let's put it there, and context dot register, and we can specify a list of component classes. So I will just specify project config dot class, and now uh, and after that we need to refresh it, and if we run it now, you can see we are getting error, no column bean of type repositories dot book repository. So the thing is, we have created an application context, so this will be an empty application context because we have not specified anything, and then we are saying to register this project config class. So okay, we are registering this project config class, but project config is not specifying anything which beans to register or what. So the Spring IC container is uh, empty now as well. And if we try to access book repository bean, so it won't find anything and it will throw an error. So how do we do that? So earlier it was working because we were specifying that look for stereotype annotations in these packages, but now we are not specifying that anywhere. So how do we do that? So we do that using component scan annotation. So this is similar to context component scan tag. So in the context component scan, we have specified the base packages, so where the stereotype annotations uh, may be available. So we can do the same thing using component scan annotation. So let's do that. So inside project config.class, what I will do is I will use component scan and I will specify base packages, and it's an array repositories and services, and let's run it again, and now this time it works fine. So yeah, if you want to put all of these together, we have a book repository class which we annotated using @repository and it's inside repositories package. Then we have book service class which is annotated using service annotation and it's inside services package, and it has one dependency on book repository which is being injected using auto-add annotation. Then we have project config. So inside the project config is inside config package, and we have specified base packages to scan using component scan annotation. So base packages we have, either we can specify one string with comma or space separated package names. So here we have specified repository and services package, and then we have specified configuration annotation so that Spring IOC container can scan whatever is present inside project config or can register project config as a configuration. And in the main method, so we are creating application context. Yeah, so this is another thing. So what you can do is, instead of using these three lines, so first creating application config annotation config application context, then registering another configuration and then refreshing the context, you can do this in one line as well. So there is another constructor of annotation config application context which takes the list of configuration classes. So I can define the class here and it will work, and in that case we can use application context as well. Application context, if we refresh it, it's working fine. So that's how we use stereotype annotations. So in order to use stereotype annotations, we need to tell Spring IOC container explicitly that these are the packages where you need to scan for stereotype annotations, and that we tell Spring IOC container using @component scan annotation, @component scan, and here we can pass the all the packages as string array or comma separated words or comma separated strings in one string, and that configuration file should be annotated with configuration annotation, and we create application context using this configuration class here, annotation config application context project config.class. So that's how we put all of these things together. Now we will discuss some more annotations: primary annotation, qualifier annotation, and scope annotation. So let's see primary annotation. So let's say book repository, instead of class it's an interface, and here we create one more class, book repository IMPL, and I will define it with repository, and it implements book repository. So this book repository IMPL is a class which implements book repository. So book repository is an interface which defines some methods which needs to be implemented. So book repository IMPL does that. And let's say there is another book repository for testing purpose. So I will create another Java class. I will give it name test book repository. This also implements book repository interface, and this is also repository. So now we have two book repository implementations. One is book repository IMPL, another is test book repository. But book service doesn't care about which implementation it gets. It only needs a book repository. So now if we run it again, we are getting this error, and the error is no qualifying bean of type repositories.book repository available. Expected single matching bean but found two. So there are two beans which satisfy this condition of type book repository IMPL and test book repository. And if there is if the Spring IC container is unable to make the decision, it will throw an error. So we need to specify that which book repository we want. So what we can do is we can use primary annotation here. So whenever we try to get book repository without specifying the name of the bean, we will always get this book repository IMPL. So if we rerun it, so that means this is a primary bean of type book repository. So now we are not getting any error. So whenever we in the book service we are trying to get, or we are trying to inject the book repository. Now there are two beans of type book repository, but one bean is defined as primary, so that will be used. And in main method as well, we are trying to access the book repository from the container. There are two, but one is primary, so that will be used here. But we can expressly tell if we want test repository. So let's say test book repository. So we can specify the name here. So now we are telling container to give us a bean of type book repository that has test book repository name. And if we run it again, now you can see this is the test book repository, and this is different from the book repository which is inside book service. So that's how we use primary annotation. Now let's look at qualifier annotation. So I won't go into detail of qualifier. We have already talked about qualifier, that how to use qualifier when we want to inject the dependencies, how to create your custom qualifier, everything we have talked previously. So in this video I will only show you how to use qualifier annotation with stereotype annotations. So if I open this project, Spring Core E12 qualifier annotations and source resources beans.xml. So here you can see we were creating beans, or we were defining beans in XML file, and in that case whenever we want to define a qualifier, we used qualifier tag inside bean tag. But now since we are using this stereotype annotations in order to define the beans, we can use qualifier annotation. So qualifier, and we can pass the name of the qualifier, so which is main. So now this repository is qualifying as main. Now what we can do is inside book service, so now there is no primary bean. So if we run it again we are getting this error because now there is no primary bean, but we can use qualifier here main. So we are telling that we need a book repository which has qualifier main, and book repository IMPL is telling that I am a bean which has qualifier main. So if we run it again, it's working fine. And again this is different from this one because this is test book repository and this is book repository IMPL. So that's how we use qualifier. Also, let's say you have a custom qualifier which is book qualifier in this case, which we have already built or we have already discussed in the qualifier annotation video. So if you go to qualifiers, book qualifier, you can create custom qualifier using uh, by creating an annotation and annotating it with qualifier and target and retention, all these things, and then you can specify whatever attributes you need. And in the XML, if you want to define a bean with these qualifications, you use qualifier and then the type of qualifier, which will be the full qualified class name of the qualifier, and then you can use this attribute. You can define a value of each attribute. So this is the attribute name, this is the value of attribute. With stereotype annotations as well, you can do the same thing. You just use the at the rate, the qualified name, then specify the value of each fields, and it will work as expected. It will work fine. So I want to go into that. So you can do that on your own. So let's do that. So if I just copy it, or let's say book qualifier, copy it, and here paste it here. So this is the book qualifier, and let's move it to qualifier package. Move to package qualifier. Okay, so we have created a qualifier, book qualifier. So we need to create a label here as well. So let's copy label as well. So label is an enum. So Control C, and I can just paste it here. So we have created a label which is beginner, intermediate, expert, and this is a book qualifier. So now let's go to book repository. IMPL. Let's create another book repository. So let's create new Java class called, let's say, Java beginner book repository. So this is the book repository which is responsible for uh, accessing the books of Java with beginner level. So we can use first of all repository, then we can use instead of qualifier we can use book qualifier. Now it takes two things, language, so let's say Java, and it takes level, so let's say level.beginner. So we why are we getting this error? Still in the not applicable to type. And Java beginner book repository, let's implement book repository. Okay, because we have in the book qualifier we need to set target as type. So type, now it will be applicable to class as well, so you need to keep that in mind. So we go to Java beginner here, and it implements book repository. So now let's override the toString method, and I will just return Java, and let's say beginner. And in the book service, let's use this qualifier here. So instead of qualifier I will use book qualifier, and it has language which will be Java, and level which will be beginner. Okay, so now here we are asking Spring IC container to provide us a book repository bean which has this book qualifier where language is Java and level is level.beginner, and we already have a book repository. So you can see Java beginner book repository implements book repository, that means it's a book repository, and it has a qualifier with language Java and level beginner. So if we run it again, Now you can see the book service has book repository, which is the correct book repository, because the two string methods of Java beginner returns this Java hyphen beginner. So that's how we can use custom qualifiers, and we can use that custom qualifier tag or custom qualifier annotation on stereotype annotation. So this will work on all type of annotation: component, service, repository, controller, everything. Now let's look at scope. So we have already discussed scope as well in the previous videos. Like we have discussed what the scope is and how to create your custom scope as well. In this video we won't talk about those things. We will just talk about how to use scope inside with stereotype annotations. So let's see that. Let's say the book service, yeah, here. So we can use a scope annotation with any stereotype annotation, and we can pass a string. So there are two strings available, prototype and singleton. So singleton is the default scope. Singleton means there will be only one instance of this bean per bean definition and per Spring container. So let's go to main and try to access book service again from the Spring IOC container. So let's say book service 2, and if we run it now, you can see this is the same instance. So in order to check whether the instance is same or not, what we can do is we can just remove this thing from here. I mean, we can remove this toString method, so it will just print the pointer to the object in memory. And now we can go to main method, and let's remove this as well. So we don't want to print the book repository, otherwise it will be confusing. And let's run it again. Okay, so yeah, I wanted to comment out this one, so let's run again. Now you can see both book service says prints to the same object. That means there is only one instance. Now let's go ahead and give it a scope prototype book service, and we rerun. Now we can see we are getting two separate instances. So prototype means whenever we try to access, whenever we will try to get instance of any bean from the Spring IC container, we will get a separate instance of that class each time. So that is prototype. Now I have already discussed in the previous videos that how to create your custom scope and how to register that scope using XML, and using that scope is same, just you need to give a scope name. So now in this video we will discuss how to register that custom scope using those annotation config application context. So this is how we do that. So now there is already a custom scope created by Spring by default, which is simple thread scope, but it is not registered by default. So we cannot use that scope without registering, so we need to register that explicitly. So let's go to main, and let's remove these things from here, and the scope is called new the simple thread scope. So what we need to do is, since this method is not available in application context, it is available in annotation config application context, so I will use that here. And that in order to register that scope, we need to get the bean factory of context and use register scope method. So context dot, so you can see the register scope is not defined on annotation config application context. We need to get the bean factory and then register scope. Now it takes two things. First is the name of the scope. So we can define anything, let's say thread, and then instance of that scope, so which will be new simple thread scope. If you are not clear about how to use custom scopes and what is the scope and anything, you need to watch my previous videos where I have specified in detail how to create your custom scope, how to register that using XML file, and how to use that scope. So we have registered the scope and then we need to refresh the context. Okay, and let's go to book service and use the thread scope. So this name should be same as what we have defined while registering the scope. And let's rerun. Now we are getting the error which is exception in thread main generic application context does not support multiple refresh attempts, just call refresh once. So the thing is that whenever we create a context or annotation config application context by providing it a class here, then it will call refresh by default or implicitly, but we cannot call refresh twice. So what we can do is we can just remove it from here, and after defining the or after registering the custom scope, we can use context dot register, and we can provide the configuration class which is project config dot class, and then we can refresh the context. Run it again. It's just working fine. So both of these instances are same because we are creating both of these in the same thread. So what simple thread scope does that it creates instance per thread basis. So in the one thread there will be one instance only. So let's try to create instance in another thread. So let's create another thread thread equal to new thread, and uh, what we need to perform in this thread, we perform this action. So we try to get bean of book service from the context and we will try to print it, and let's start the thread, and if we run it again, yeah, now we are getting two separate instances because the first book service is inside main thread and the second book service is inside another thread which we have created here. So that's how we registered the custom scope and the how to use custom scope. But how to create a custom scope, that I already discussed in the previous videos. You can watch those videos. Now let's see naming the auto detected beans. So far we have seen how Spring IOC container auto detect the beans which are annotated with stereotype annotations using component scan annotation. But let's see what are the names of those beans. So let's say you have a bean book repository which is annotated with repository annotation or any stereotype annotation, component service controller or anything. The name will be the class name, but the first character will be in a small letter. So book repository will become book repository with small b. But you can specify name explicitly. So let's say we are specifying the name my book repository. Then the name of the bean will be my book repository. But let's say you have two different packages, repositories and repositories 2, and those contains two classes with the same name, which is possible because that's uh, that's the purpose of package, such that you can have classes with the same name in different packages. So let's say you have two classes with the same name book repository, but in two different packages, repositories and repositories 2, and you don't define the bean names explicitly, but you just use repository annotation. In this case, both of the beans will have the same name, which is book repository, and then you will get this exception, which is conflicting bean definition exception, and the error will tell you that there is already a bean with the name book repository in repositories package, and now you are trying to create a bean with the same name book repository in repositories 2 package, which is not allowed because In Spring IOC container, there can be only one bean with one name. No two beans can have the same name. So you will get this conflicting bean definition exception. Now how to do that? The one possible solution is that you can define the bean names explicitly, but let's say while defining the name as well, you don't know if there is another bean in the another package with the same name, and you end up defining the same name. Then again you will get this error. So what you would want, that you would want to have fully qualified class name as the bean name. So if the first bean had name repositories.book repository, and the second bean had name repositories2.book repository, then those two names will be different and you won't get this exception. So is this possible? The answer is yes, it is possible. And how do we do that? First of all, let's try to produce this exception. So let's create another package. So new Java class. I will use repositories2 dot book repository impl, and let's annotate it with repository annotation and run it. So you won't get any error. uh, why? Because Spring ISA container is not even considering this class, because we have not specified repositories to package to be scanned. So let's do that. So go to project config. Okay, in the project config, define repositories to repositories to. Now Spring ISA container will scan repositories to package as well, and it will try to create beans with all the components which are annotated with stereotype annotation. So let's refresh it, and now we get an error. Annotation is specified bean name book repository impl for bean class conflicts with the existing non-compatible bean definition of the same name and class. So in the repositories we have a book repository impl, and we are not explicitly specifying the bean name. So the bean name will be book repository with a small b, sorry, book repository impl with small b. And in the repositories 2 package as well, we have book repository impl. So the name will be book repository impl with a small b. And let's implement book repository as well, and if we run it, so we will get this exception again. So now how do we resolve this? So the solution is using bean name generator. So while scanning the stereotype annotation packages, you can specify the name generator, that how do you want to generate the bean names. And there is one class which is called fully qualified annotation bean name generator. So you can use that class, that is provided by out of the box by Spring, but it is not used out of the box. So you need to explicitly tell IOC container to use fully qualified annotation bean name generator class, and it will generate the fully qualified bean name. So for example, for the book repository which is inside repositories package, you will get the name repositories.book repository, and for book repository class inside repositories2 package, you will get the name repositories2.book repository. And by doing that, Spring is happy and you are also happy. So now let's do that. So okay, in the project config, let's define another field for component scan, which is name generator, and the name generator we want to use is fully qualified dot class, fully qualified annotation bean name generator dot class. Let's restart. Now we are not getting any error, because those are now different names. Let's try to validate that. So I will just comment it out, and context dot get context get bean names for type, or let's say get beans of type book repository. So this will provide us all with all the beans of type book repository, and then dot for each system dot out dot println out println. Reference to println is ambiguous. Both println and println boolean match. Okay. So for each, let's say bean incompatible parameter types in lambda expression, the wrong number of parameters expected to but found one. Okay, what does it return? It returns string and t. Okay, so it returns name of the bean and the bean itself. So let's say for each bean name and bean, let's say we want to print both bean name and bean, so println bean name plus bean, and let's run it again. Okay, now you can see we have how many? Yeah, four beans of type book repository. One is repositories.book repository impl. Now you can see we have fully qualified class name as the bean name, and this is the instance. Then we have repositories.java beginner book repository, repositories.test book repository, and repositories2.book repository impl. So we are able to verify that this this class fully qualified annotation bean name generator is working. So you can define your own name generator as well. So for that, okay, so the video is over, but let's search for fully qualified annotation bean name generator. So if we go there, then we can see bean name generator. So you can implement this bean name generator interface and you can use that. So you need to implement generate bean name method, which takes bean definition and bean definition registry, and you can generate the name of the bean on your own logic, and you can use that class for name generator field. So that's how we use annotations to create the beans in a Spring ISA container. In this video we have looked at stereotype annotations. So in the next videos we will look at another annotation like @bean annotation. So that's it for this video. We have covered a lot in this video. I will meet you in the next video. Until then, keep learning, and thank you for watching the video. Bye.